So, first things first, how did you get into the fashion world? Because I feel like in the last, I don't know, year, 2 years, a few of my friends had mentioned your hats to me, and then I started seeing them on all of my favorite people. How did that all begin?
Yeah, so I mean, it started in the beginning of the pandemic, kind of out of nowhere, really, right? So like I wasn't traveling as much with clients and for work, just like everyone else, and uh, I just decided one day that I was like, I need this Siegelman Stable hat and sweatshirt that my dad. So my dad's a racehorse trainer, and has had his own racing stable since the '80s, and I never really had any pieces that had his two like main logos that we started this brand out with, that my mom actually hand drew in the '80s, and was like, I want to create or like recreate this one hat that I had, and make three different colorway hats in his colors, and then used a jacket that I had as well. That was my grandfather's jacket, to create the different colorways of the three crew neck sweatshirts that we had. And when I first did it, I had no intent of selling it. I was really just making it for myself and maybe like my family and friends. And then once I started posting it on like Instagram, I had enough DMs, people asking where they could buy it, and then finally decided to just launch a Shopify and give it a go. So literally started this whole thing with like 300 bucks. No clue how to set up a Shopify, no clue what I was doing in terms of fashion and blanks to use or design or anything like that. But definitely quickly had to learn and figure that out as we started selling it. But when we first started selling it, I made a promise to myself and I guess my dad and my family that we would stick very strict to the brand story, which is basically my dad's story. And for anything that we sold, we would donate a portion of proceeds to different equine therapy programs around the world.
Got it. That's very cool. I didn't know that. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Um, and you went with hats because you had a hat that looked like that when you were growing up, and that was the first thing that came to mind.
Yeah, so I had this like red silk, pretty much a trucker hat, but it had like a piece of yarn across the front, like super vintage hat from the '80s, that I guess my dad made for like him and the people who worked for him in his barn and in his stable. And then a jacket, and I tried to recreate that hat as best as I possibly could, with what I thought would look good either on me or just at time in that moment, like what was trendy. And then this jacket that I was like, I didn't know how to recreate a jacket, so I just took the big logo that was on the back of it, and the easiest thing I thought was to make these three different colorway sweatshirts using that bigger Siegelman Racing Stable logo.
Cool. Did your family ever, or did like your dad ever put out any products like back in the
Yeah,
80s,
so
or was it all
quick
just
funny story on
him?
that is the answer is no. It's not like he ever intended to sell it. Like his job was literally like training racehorses. That's how he made a living and supported our family. He made some stuff for just like the groomsmen and women who worked for him or assistant trainers and all
That's
that
funny.
stuff. So then fast forward to literally like 6 months ago, I'm looking on like Google Shop. Every now and then I'll see what's getting resold and the prices it's at and all that just for fun. And I went deep enough where I found this red jacket that said someone's name Bill on the front with the Siegelman logo, this one on my hat, on the front. And then on the back, a slightly different design of two horses next to each other. And then the same exact font, it said Siegelman Stable. And I was like, what the fuck? And it was being sold on a vintage store website out of Denmark. So I took a screenshot, I sent it to my dad. I was like, yo, what is this all about? He's like, I have no idea. So he had no clue at first. He hangs up the phone, calls me back like 20 minutes later. He's like, this guy named Bill worked for me in like the 90s. And he's like, I used to make like Christmas gifts or stuff for people, just like someone at the track would make them. And he's like, I think that that's what that is. And I'm like, dude, you don't want to tell me any of this stuff as you like see what we're doing now and see what's going on. So the story is that was Bill, the guy that worked for my dad's jacket. Bill lived in New Jersey. He moved from New Jersey, I think, to like Florida. And in the process, I guess one of the trucks was like broken into and some boxes were stolen. The jacket
No
ended up
way.
in a vintage store in LA, and the vintage store in Denmark came to the United States to vintage stores on the East Coast and West Coast, bought stuff, sent it back to Denmark to sell in the store. Long story short, even though it's still long, I bought the jacket after it said it was sold out, and I sent an email for like maybe $80, and they sent it to me. So I am now in possession of said Bill Siegelman Stable jacket that was made in the 90s.
That's pretty
Yeah.
funny. So at first, did you think they were like violating copyright, or it was like another
No,
producer? What
I
was your?
knew it had to be something. I knew it had to be something. Like it was too like the font was the exact font that we use, or that like it existed on the logo in the 80s that my mom created for my dad. And I was like, something's up with it. Like no one's making this fake. It's in a vintage store. It's not like it's like 1999 on some like website that looks super whatever you want to call
Sure.
it, like knockoff. So I was like, there has to be more to the story, and I mean, it took a day to get to the bottom of it, but the most important piece of it for me was getting it back in our hands.
That's so
Yeah.
fun.